Welcome back into the Dynasty Nerds YouTube page. I'm Garret Price, and let's start mocking it up. We've got a 20-round, 12-team, Superflex, tight end premium mock draft right on the way. As I mentioned in the open, we are doing a 12-team Superflex, tight end premium mock draft. Now, I'm in the 12th spot right now. And for me overall, it's come down to one of two things. In this year's crop of players, if I'm doing a startup, I either want to be one of the first two picks or I want to be one of the last two picks. And the reason is I think the gap between the safety, security, and upside that you get from a Patrick Mahomes versus getting it from almost any other source, honestly, is a pretty big deal. So the guys like CJ Stroud and Jalen Hurts and players like that, I don't see them much differently than Anthony Richardson and Jordan Love. So for me, I think it's absolutely worth it to, in fact, get the first two picks, or if not, just wait till towards the end. All right, and away we go. Yes, that's right. 12 teams. I'm in spot number 12. So right now we have the 3-minute clock on. It gives me enough time to be able to talk about my picks specifically. But of course, we want to look and see how everyone else is selecting as well. So in the first 4 picks here, we see it's 4 straight quarterbacks. Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen. Neither one of those picks really surprised me. I think that's how it's gonna go in basically every single draft. But then we see Jalen Hurts and CJ Stroud. I think those are fine picks. And had I been in those same spots, those would have been the picks that I probably would have taken as well. But with how things go, I would much rather just wait. I don't see a big difference between them and guys, like I said, like Anthony Richardson, Jordan Love, Kyler Murray. A lot of players that I think have a ton of value that have end of the first, beginning of the second round ADP. So I would much rather just kind of sit back and wait and then have the much better second round selection come to me. All right, so this has been pretty interesting. Lamar Jackson goes at 1.5, and then a guy that I was targeting towards the end, and Anthony Richardson, just went off the board. So we have Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, CJ Stroud, Lamar Jackson, Anthony Richardson, and then we have our first wide receiver off the board. Now, to remind you, these are real people. These are people that follow me on Twitter. I just tweeted it out, so who knows what their typical draft strategies are. So 6 quarterbacks. Then we've got CeeDee Lamb as the first wide receiver off the board in this Superflex Dynasty League, which is interesting. It used to be a no-brainer, Justin Jefferson, first non-quarterback off the board every time. But that's been changing a little bit this past year, especially with CeeDee Lamb being the #1 overall player last year in Fantasy Football League. So CeeDee Lamb with a monster season, and now he's being rewarded for it as the top receiver off the board. Right away, right after that, though, we do get Justin Jefferson. So 2 good young receivers off the board here. And now we move on to the back half of the draft here, the last 4 picks that we have: 109, 110, 111, and then your boy here at 112 and 2-1. So Justin Herbert, another guy that I was strongly considering taking at the 112. So we're going to have to see who's available. Now, I've become much more comfortable with taking a running back, specifically Bijan or Breece Hall, towards the end of this first round, second round range. And here we go. I have the opportunity to do just that. So let's go ahead and have these guys come up here. Joe Burrow, though, has fallen all the way to my pick here at 112. I'm ecstatic. I thought for sure he was going to be one of the top 6 picks off the board. He wasn't. So I'm going to get myself a little Joe Burrow, and then I get that Bijan Robinson as well. So I get a guy that I would have been comfortable taking as the 4th quarterback or so off the board, and I get him here at 112, and then I get the #1 running back as well. Jagsy might have been looking for that stack with Joe Burrow, but of course it did not happen here, but he gets the 2 wide receivers. All right, at 2-3, we have Marvin Harrison Jr. So nice little young core there with Caleb Williams and Marvin Harrison Jr. That team has there. Then our first 2 quarterback team to get one in the first and in the second round, Justin Herbert, Jordan Love. So another team with young assets at the position that are going to be there for a long time. Justin Jefferson, you add Kyler Murray to that mix. So Kay Franks has a nice young quarterback as well. But then my guy over here, he's like, dude, screw the quarterback position. I'm going to find value later. I'm going to take CeeDee Lamb and Christian McCaffrey, go for a win now approach, which honestly, I don't hate, but you got to make sure you get those quarterbacks later. We'll see what's still there and available for him once it comes back around at 3-7. We have completed the second round now. We have Brock Purdy going off the board to primetime mock. Then we've got the 2 running backs, Breece Hall, Jahmyr Gibbs. I love those guys in the second round. If I had a pick towards the top, those would absolutely be targets of mine. Puka Nacua goes off the board at 210. The first tight end, it is a tight end premium. So we get the first tight end off the board here at 211 with Sam Laporta. And then our first pick, he had Patrick Mahomes overall. Then he gets Garrett Wilson and Drake London, 2 good young wide receivers to go along with this stud quarterback. So far, nothing too outside of the ordinary. Maybe a tad bit higher for Sam Laporta than normal, or, maybe Christian McCaffrey going a little bit higher, going ahead of Breece Hall and Jahmyr Gibbs. But for the most part, nothing's been too out of the ordinary. All right, at 3-2, we have A.J. Brown going off the board, Jaden Daniels. We got the rookie quarterback going off the board here at 3-3. Malik Neighbors, his teammate, going off the board at 3-4. Trevor Lawrence at 3-5. And then the stud Tyreek Hill would have been a great selection for the next team if they were going all in. But he goes here at the 3-6. And then Chris Olave, real big make or break season, I think, for Olave fantasy-wise. A little bit of a down year this past year, but he could totally redeem himself, be one of the top fantasy options that we think he can be as this young stud receiver. As we approach my pick here, we just saw Kyron Williams, Dalton Kincaid, and Dak Prescott go off the board. Prescott's one that hurts quite a bit. I'm not going to lie. He's somebody that I really was hoping to get here at the end of the third round. I would have loved that value as a guy that's not as old as the Staffords, the Rodgers, the Cousins. He's somebody that really could have been a solid asset for me for quite a long time. So really disappointed to not be able to get him here. So let's look at some of the best available players that we have according to Sleeper right now. So we have Travis Etienne, Saquon Barkley, Brandon Ayuk, Jalen Waddle, Rome Odunze, Trey McBride, Devon Achane, Tua Tagovailoa, and a few receivers as well. So I know who I'm going to go with here. Now, it might be a little outside of ADP, but for me, I love Devon Achane. And if I can get 2 really, really talented running backs at that position, it's a tough one to really get enough ammo. Now I'm set for a long time. And if you go back to watch some of our other videos, the emphasis that we put on those top tier elite running backs, very, very different than just getting middling guys later. So I've got 2 really strong running backs. I don't have to worry about the position for a while now. And now I'm looking at quarterback. For me, Tua, Jared Goff, both interesting options, but I'm going to go with Tua. You've got the youth on his side, plus those awesome receiving options. So for me, now I have 2 running backs and 2 quarterbacks here at the end of the draft, a strategy that I really like quite a bit because there's so much value later at the wide receiver position. Now, I'm going to have to figure out what to do at tight end. It is a tight end premium, and maybe a good one will come back to me, and if so, awesome. But if not, I'm going to be loading up on some of those wide receivers because there's still some really solid receivers that are going to be left in the 5th and 6th round. Oh, not to mention, I also forgot I would get the stack there because we know Achane's going to be getting a lot of receiving options. I wish I could say that I really thought that through as I was selecting. No, it's just a happy accident. Right after I selected, we see Jared Goff went off the board. Then the other Miami teammate in Jalen Waddle. So we already have 4 Miami Dolphins off the board. And then Rome Odunze, another rookie. So such a good, talented rookie class. But what I'm seeing right now is guys aren't gobbling up the tight ends quite as quickly as I thought. So looks like there could be a good shot where one of these tight ends gets back to me at the 5-12 or at the 6-1. At 4-5, we see Travis Etienne goes off the board. Then we've got the breakout player last year, Nico Collins, Brandon Ayuk, then somebody gobbling up value on Trey McBride. McBride usually isn't going crazy far after Laporta. Him and Kincaid pretty close together in ADP. So that's a pretty good value on Trey McBride there. Then we have Devonta Smith going, Michael Pittman Jr. I have both of those guys back-to-back in my wide receiver rankings. So it makes sense that they would go back-to-back here. That leaves us with the first and second team still to draft. Down the turn, we see Rachaad White go at 4-11. For me, it's a bit early on Rachaad White. He was really inefficient last year, and I know we're not super worried about Bucky Irving, but anybody that could be taking touches away from a guy that wasn't super efficient could really hurt things quite a bit. So Rachaad White goes there at 4-11. Kyle Pitts, I thought he was one of the guys that might get back to me. He did not. He went here at 4-12. T. Higgins goes at the 5-1. And then J.J. McCarthy, he goes off the board at 5-2. So we don't have a lot of teams left with only one quarterback. We have Tolman, Big Russ. Then we have Conflict. He doesn't have any. K. Franks only has one. And then only one for Jagsy. So about half the league has at least two quarterbacks at this point. So we're going to kind of have to see how quickly some of these other guys get off the board, because this is where that tier of Drake May and Deshaun Watson and Baker Mayfield, Kirk Cousins, we're going to see all those guys come off the board here within the next round and a half or so. So we'll see how quickly all those guys are gobbled up. At 5-3, we see Saquon Barkley go off the board. Brock Bowers at 5-4. So those tight ends are starting to dry up a little bit. We'll see if I get one or not. At 5-5, our first team taking three quarterbacks. So really leaning in to those premium positions here at quarterback and tight end, really capitalizing on those guys. DK Metcalf off the board at 5-6. Then we have Jonathan Brooks at 5-7 and Kenneth Walker. The auto pick team now at this point used to be K. Franks. They are going hard at the running back spot. No way. I thought I was for sure getting Mark Andrews at the 5-12 here. And this team takes two tight ends. So another team really leaning in heavy to that tight end premium. So that one hurts pretty bad. So I'm going to have to pivot at this point because I want to take value. And normally I would still be all over TJ Hawkinson, but I'm a little bit worried about his connection with JJ McCarthy. He was an okay tight end when it was just him in Detroit. Then Kirk Cousins really elevated his game. Now with the addition of a guy like JJ McCarthy, how good are we really going to get? It's tough to say. So for me, I'd probably rather capitalize at the wide receiver position and then probably just punt tight end until later, because I hate getting middling tight ends using 6th, 7th, 8th round picks on guys that are just okay, but aren't going to be difference makers. I would rather wait till 9, 10, 11, 12 and gobble up some tight ends there and maybe get a guy that breaks out. All right, so DJ Moore goes at 5-11, and then I am up to make my selection. So I'm looking pretty hot and heavy at the wide receiver position. Now, Bryce Young is there. Kirk Cousins is there. Those are some quarterbacks that are pretty interesting. But let's go overall here, and we want to take the best available players that we can possibly get. For me, I have Tank Dell pretty high on my list. I like Xavier Worthy a lot as well. But let's go with Deebo Samuel, a little bit older, but an established asset, so I can take a little bit more of a risky pick. I think I'm going to go, Tank Dell and Zay Flowers. That's really tricky for me. I am going to go with Tank Dell. But I could go either way on that one. So now that helps build up my wide receiver core, because I was obviously severely lacking there. Get a little bit of a younger upside player with a veteran that probably only has maybe 3-4 more seasons left, but we know he's really talented and can put up a lot of points. A guy that was formerly a number 3 overall receiver on the season. At 6'3", we have TJ Hawkinson off the board. Ladd McConkey goes 6'4". Travis Kelce goes at 6'5". So the old tight end finds a home there. Bryce Young next off the board. Isaiah Pacheco at 6'7". Jackson Smith and Jigba at 6'8". George Pickens at 6'9". And we're all the way back down to the other turn while we're waiting on pick 610. All right, we have our pick at 610. It is James Cook. Xavier Worthy goes off the board at 6'11". Jordan Addison at 6'12". We have Trey Benson, who I like quite a bit. It's their first running back, but he's somebody that I would have loved to have added as my third running back. Brian Thomas at 7'2", and then Jaden Reed at 7'3". After Jaden Reed, we've got Baker Mayfield off the board, Christian Kirk, Rashee Rice, then Kirk Cousins. So Baker Mayfield, Kirk Cousins lasted a decent while longer than Drake May after he went at 5'5", so they lasted about 2 rounds later. So pretty good value at the quarterback there. And Conflict got a pretty solid squad. He went with the win now, or the lack of quarterback approach early, but got Kirk Cousins late. I'm not sold on Bryce Young, but obviously got some good win now players in CeeDee Lamb and in Christian McCaffrey. All right, so I was back on the clock here at pick 712, and of course the 8-1 because I have the turn. Was really heavily considering taking Deshaun Watson there. Also really loved the Ramondre Stevenson pick. So both of those guys got sniped just before I was able to go. I ended up going with Javonte Williams and Terry McLaurin here. I really considered Najee Harris as another potential option, but going with these two guys, I think this gives me a strong upside running back that, yes, carries some risk, but I think has a ton of upside if he's able to repeat what he was doing before the knee injury. And Terry McLaurin, love him as a wide receiver 3 this season. We've seen guys in the past that are veteran receivers just blossom once they finally get a capable quarterback to throw them the football. And there were tons of miscues at the position. Sam Howell was under that 70% mark for catchable targets, which isn't super great at the wide receiver position. So I think Terry McLaurin gets a lot more help this season. The guy I just talked about, Najee Harris, goes 8-2, then Keon Coleman at pick 8-3. At 8-4, we have the veteran receiver Devontae Adams, 8-5, Alvin Kamara, and then Zamir White, who has a big opportunity to really do well for himself this year. It's going into a year 3 for him, but those last 4 games of the season last year, he was one of the top running backs in fantasy football. So has a huge opportunity here to really cement himself as a legitimate NFL running back. At 8-7, we have George Kittle. So a new run. It's been about 2.5 rounds since we've seen a tight end go off the board, but here we have George Kittle as the next one up. After George Kittle, Deontay Johnson, Derrick Henry, Mike Evans, Cooper Kupp, and then my boy Tyjae Spears off the board, Adonai Mitchell at 9-1. Then we get the rookie quarterback Bo Nix there at 9-2. So this team's going for a young approach at the quarterback position. You got Bo Nix and J.J. McCarthy. A little bit of risk, but obviously very high reward if those guys hit. And then at 9-3, we have Jake Ferguson, who had a fantastic season last year for the Dallas Cowboys. At 9-4, we have the veteran receiver Stephon Diggs, and then Michael Penix. So this team getting another quarterback as well. Man, these guys are making it tough on me. So George Kittle and Evan Ingram off the board for primetime mock. Then we have K. Frank's team that has Kelsey and Njoku. So teams taking multiple tight ends within the top 10 rounds. Now, I can understand the strategy. It's not something I would do necessarily, but I know my boys Matt and Rich love doing that. And so I can understand it. I wouldn't do it because I'm not usually able or willing to start a tight end in my flex spot. But if you're going to get enough points per game, what does it matter what position it comes from as long as they get you the points? But having those two guys gone does hurt quite a bit. So once again, you just have to pivot in these situations. You still got to go with the best available players and not reach just because of where you're at. So we've got David Njoku off the board, then Amari Cooper, Will Levis, and then Matthew Stafford. So I am up and I am looking at my board right now. So of all the positions we've got here, we've got David Montgomery, Tony Pollard, Ricky Pearsall, Xavier Legette. So we've got a lot of running backs, a lot of wide receivers. Quarterback-wise, best available, Aaron Rodgers. It's a tough pill to swallow. He's an older guy, but probably worth the value. Tight end wise, just don't think it's worth it. I don't see a big difference in any of these guys. So definitely not going tight end, but I am probably going to get my third quarterback because I think those guys are so valuable. And then I'm going to go back to overall and look at some of these best available players. And right now, with all of the stuff swirling around San Francisco, Ricky Pearsall just keeps looking better and better to me. So I'm going to take Ricky Pearsall with this pick. After Ricky Pearsall, we see Aaron Jones, Calvin Ridley, David Montgomery, Xavier Legette, another guy I was thinking about when I was making my Pearsall pick, Dalton Schultz, Jaylen Warren, and then we have Hollywood Brown at 10-8. So we are now at the 10-9 selection, and let's see who gets taken here. It's going to be Tony Pollard, so the older half of the duo there in Tennessee. At the 10-10, we have Christian Watson off the board. Then a little running back run here. Blake Corum, Zach Moss, Kendre Miller. Some upside running backs for the season. Dallas Goedert off the board at 11-12. Brian Robinson at 11-3. Pat Freiermuth at 11-4. So these guys keep taking these tight ends from me. I might just have to punt the position altogether and make a trade after the draft. Sometimes that's the best available option as opposed to reaching for a guy that you don't really like in that spot. Jalen Polk at 11-5, and then Geno Smith at 11-6. After Geno Smith, we've got Ben Sinnott, James Conner, Justin Fields, Jameson Williams, and Marshawn Lloyd. So I'm up here at the turn once again, and let's see some of our best available players. We do have Cole Kmet here sitting, and he's probably the last tight end that you feel decent about starting. Could get an upside guy like Luke Musgrave, but outside of that, lots of flyers. So I'm going to go ahead and take Cole Kmet. Still gives me at least a starting caliber tight end, even though he's not my favorite for the season. Then we go back to our overall, and we look at who's the available players, guys that we could potentially be taking. And there's a lot of names that are really interesting in here, but I think one of the most interesting long-term for me is Jalen Wright. Jalen Wright, that young running back for the Miami Dolphins. Now I've got that tandem. And most of the time, I don't want both running backs on the same team. But we saw what Achane and Mostert did at the same time last year. When those guys are on and the things are cooking, each of them only need one big play to make something happen. So now I have either trade bait for the future or I'm comfortable starting both those guys. Not that I would necessarily need to. I have Achane, I have Javonte Williams, but then, of course, I've got Bijan Robinson that's going to be starting each and every single week. After Jalen Wright, we've got Luke Musgrave, Austin Eckler, Devin Singletary, Keenan Allen, Daniel Jones, Zach Charbonnet, and then basically the Jalen Wright clone, Raheem Mostert, Jerome Ford at 12-9, and then my guy KCG, 51 is up, and he takes Jahan Dotson at 12-10. Sneaky bounce back candidate this year. Guy that was a first-round pick, had a good rookie season, but then really just a tough sophomore campaign. But maybe he finds a rhythm with that Jaden Daniels selection, which I believe this team got earlier. So a nice little connection that this team built there. At 12-11, we see Troy Franklin off the board, and then one that hurts because I kind of wanted to pair him up with Joe Burrow, and I really like this player a lot more than consensus. Jermaine Burton. Thought I'd be able to sneak around, still grab him. Fortunately, he goes here at 2-12. In the 13th round here at 13-1, we've got Spencer Rattler off the board. Then Chase Brown, the Bengals running back. Nick Chubb, which is one of the biggest boom-bust potential picks, and it's way more boom than bust at this point because you miss on a 13th round pick, oh well. But if Nick Chubb is anywhere close to how he had been playing and we see it for another season or two, this could be a great value pick here at 13-3. Josh Downs goes at 13-4. Dontavian Wicks goes at 13-5. And then Cortland Sutton at 13-6. At the 13-7, we have Michael Wilson, Jerry Jeudy at 13-8. J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards back-to-back, which, as they should, we have no idea how that backfield's going to work out. And then DeAndre Hopkins at 13-11. So I am back up and on the clock. Let's see who we've got as some of the best available. Romeo Doubs, Roman Wilson, but look, Derek Carr's here. You give me any starting quarterback this late in a draft, I'm gobbling up that value all day long. So I'm going to take him here. And then you also have Russell Wilson. I don't love Russell Wilson, but once again, there's going to be teams that are going to need a quarterback. So I'm going to pull the trigger and take another starting quarterback. Yes, that gives me 5 starting quarterbacks, but overall, take the best player available, and those are the best guys at this point. After my back-to-back quarterbacks, we have Jatavian Sanders, Gardner Minshew, Roman Wilson, and Khalil Shakir get taken. After Khalil Shakir, we have Aiden O'Connell, Luke McCaffrey, Curtis Samuel, Romeo Doubs. Then we have Palmer, Myers, and Marvin Mims, who I like quite a bit as a late round flyer. Then we're into the final round. I know we said 20, but for time's sake, we decided to do a round of 15. So Jelani Woods, Zeke Elliott, who could end up being the starter this year. It's looking very likely at this point. Pop Douglas, likely going at 15-4. Very good backup tight end. Rashad Bateman, Kamani Vidal. Then we have Rashid Shaheed, Quentin Johnston off the board there at 15-8. At 59, Wan'Dale Robinson, Malachi Corley, and then one more pick till I get the final selection in the draft. Roshan Johnson goes at 15-11. So with all of the players still there, still available with some upside, oh man, some really interesting names still left at this point. I'm going to go ahead and take a stab at Bucky Irving. Made the comment about what we saw in Rachaad White earlier. So I'm going to take a shot just in case. So let's go ahead and recap what I did so far in this draft. And of course, this is not a real league. It's just a mock startup. But let's see what I've got going on. So at the top, we've got Joe Burrow, Bijan Robinson, Devon Achane, Tua Tagovailoa, Deebo Samuel, Tank Dell, Javonte Williams, Terry McLaurin, Aaron Rodgers, Ricky Pearsall, Cole Kmet, Jalen Wright, David Carr, or Derek, either one. And then we've got Russell Wilson and Bucky Irving. So let me know who was the most surprising player. Which team of all of these teams is your favorite? We'll post the board in the description so that way you're able to see all of it. And then ultimately, what'd you think? How'd I do in my startup Superflex tight end premium mock draft?